Hey everybody, hang tight. We'll be with you in a second.
Ladies in the know, all dreams divine, oh they look fine. Ladies in the know, all dreams divine, oh they look fine. Ladies in the know, all dreams divine, oh they look fine. Ladies in the know, all dreams divine, oh they look fine. Look at him, look at her, look at you, look at me too. Look at him, look at her, look at you. Look at me too. Look at him, look at her, look at you. You look at me too. Look at him, look at her, look at you. You know you look good too. Ladies in the know, all dreams divine, oh they look fine. Ladies in the know, all dreams divine, oh
Hey, should we get this started? I think we should probably get this thing started.
dreams divine, oh they look fine. Ladies in the know, all dreams divine, oh they look fine. Look at you, look at ladies in the know, all dreams divine, oh they look fine. Look at you, look at ladies in the know, all dreams divine, oh they look fine. Look at you, look at ladies in the know, all dreams divine, oh they look fine. Look at you, look at ladies in the know, all dreams divine, oh they look fine.
Hello and good evening, everyone. Welcome to Volume 2 of Steinberg Sessions, Club Cubase. I am Brent. I am your host. I work for Yamaha Canada Music. And if you would like to follow us or learn more about these sessions, you can check us out at Yamaha Canada Solutions on Facebook. This is the group that we run that you get all the updates and you get me wearing all the Steinberg swag and making bad dad jokes. Actually, I was told that for those of you that have sort of seen those in Toronto area Oliver Jeweler commercials, I'm like that guy, like the cash money guy. So yeah, if you like bad jokes, I'm your man. Yeah, so check out Yamaha Canada Solutions. Send me an email. You can either get me at solutions@yamaha.ca or bbodrug@yamaha.ca. That's really hard. Maybe JG can type that into the thing. This song is called Ladies in the Know. And speaking of ladies in the know, I have Jenny, JG, the OG, with us again. We had this great plan that we were going to have Jenny call in on Skype, and her window is going to be up there. For some reason, I don't think she's there. She is on my screen. I can see her. She looks great, and Jenny is awesome, and she's there for me. But I guess you guys can't see her. But she can talk in my ear. So if you have questions, type them into the box. Jenny can talk to me. If I'm saying jokes that are really bad, she can shut me down. If my session is boring, she can shut me down. She can just basically communicate with me and help me know what you guys want to know. So anyway, there was a couple of questions from the last session that because we were running a bit late, I kind of skipped over. I wanted to address them before we get into Ladies in the Know here. The first question was, do we do events in Montreal or just in Toronto? This stream is streaming across the country and actually I think anywhere in the world. JG can confirm that for me. But it's on YouTube, so anyone can watch this and anywhere in Canada and outside of Canada, I'm assuming. So really, if you're in Montreal, you can tune in online. I think there are some events, some Club Cubase events in Montreal. I'd have to check with my colleagues on that because I only run the Toronto sessions, so I don't know exactly about Montreal, but I'm pretty sure there's lots of events happening. But having said that, if you Montreal folks would like us to get in a car or a plane, maybe not a plane right now, get in a car, drive to Montreal and do a session when things are all opened up again, I would love to do that. So let us know. Again, just send us an email and we can make that happen for you. The other questions, yes, I can hear you, JG. My Skype mic is on. Bye-bye, Skype Mike. That means JG can hear me twice. Is that better, JG? JG can hear me twice, and as much as we enjoy talking, I don't think anybody wants to hear me twice. So anyway. So the second question was, do I use side chains at all in my mixing, and how would that work with bouncing individual tracks down as audio files? So when we bounce, anything that's happening on that channel, if I'm bouncing an individual channel, will come out of that channel. So if I have a sidechain compressor hooked up, no problem. When I bounce that track, it is bouncing out of that channel. And for those of you that don't remember the whole bouncing routine, let's go just to the big screen. We can go File, Export, Audio Mix Down, and then along the left-hand side of the screen, we have a bunch of options for whichever channel we would like. So all we have to do is select the channel we want, set up whatever credentials we want it to have. Credentials, I sound so business-like. Set up whatever specs we want it to have, name it, hit export audio, and we're good to go. So if you're using sidechain compression, no problem at all. You can bounce from that track with the sidechain engaged, and it will be archived forever. And the last question from Steve was, how do I record guitar even though I didn't use the tracks in the mix? The mix from last time, for those that joined us, I had some guitar parts that were not in the mix, and I hid them because I had decided I didn't like them very much, and they didn't make the final mix, and Nadine wanted me to bounce a mix with all the guitar parts in, and I still might do that. But at the time, we were, again, running out of time, and I didn't get to it, and whatever. So in the last mix, the guitars that I used in that were actually a Native Instrument virtual plugin. They were fake guitars. I'm sorry for all you guitar players out there, but I have good news, because tonight, in tonight's edition, Volume 2 of Steinberg Sessions Club Cubase, I have a track, Ladies in the Know, that is entirely live recorded instruments. So the guitars here were recorded with microphones through amps, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as soon as we get going. But anyway, you heard the song when we first came in. Why don't I play it one more time in its entirety, and I'll flip around the screen and give you guys a little tour, and you can see, like always, I use way too many tracks and way too many plugins, but it gives us so much fun stuff to talk about. So without further ado, here is Ladies in the Know.
That there are other worlds is insane to me. The legend here is so much fun. Uptown in old New York is the place to be. I'm Helen Mary, 'cause I'm mine all night. me too. Look at him, look at her, look at you. You know you look good too. Ladies in the know, all dreams divine, oh they look fine. Ladies in the know, all dreams divine, oh they look fine. Ladies in the know, all dreams divine, oh they look fine. Ladies in the know, all dreams divine, oh they look fine. Look at you, look at ladies in the know, all dreams divine, oh they look fine. Look at you, look at ladies in the know, all dreams divine, oh they look fine. Look at you, look at ladies in the know, all dreams divine, oh they look fine. Look at you, look at ladies in the know, all dreams divine, oh they look fine.
Okay, we're back. I think the screen froze. Is that the case? I think so. But I think we got it back. Anyway, so tonight's session I'm sort of informally calling the anatomy of a mix, because this track has all kinds of cool things. And for those that have been attending Club Cubase even before I took over, when Dave was still doing it, he had me come in as a guest once, and I actually brought this track. So if it sounds familiar to you, that's why. But I think I did this in 2014, and I think that there's lots of reason to revisit it, because every time I pull it up, I'm reminded of different things I did, and it sort of covers a lot of the bases of a lot of my strategies for a lot of things. So I think it was useful to remount it, and it's been a few years, and even if you remember the tune, hopefully you forgot what we were talking about. But anyway, let's dive in. So these guys, they're called the Doyle Brothers, and they are from New York. They live in New York City, originally from Buffalo, New York. They're doing a live broadcast every week now called Nickel City Blues, or Nickel City Stream, or Nickel City. And they perform, and they have guests, and they're actually using all these tracks that we did. So that's why I was reminded that I might want to use this again as I tuned in and checked it out. And anyway, it was pretty cool to... Oh, hey JG, I can hear you through my speaker, and it's stuff I said like 5 minutes ago, so I'm just gonna turn you off, JG. Sorry, I can't hear you anymore. I'll know when you put your headphones back on that we're good. Sorry folks for couple little technical glitches. I promise that we're working on making this better, and we're going to make the video better, and it's all going to be better. This actually might be the last stream from... There we go. This might be the last stream from this location, because I'm moving, so I'm going to have a brand new home studio, and it'll be good. So anyway, I got you, JG. We're good. Except there's this like tremendous latency between this. We should probably have a session afterwards where when we talk to each other, it's in real time. But anyway, so Nickel City Noise, that's what it's called, Nickel City Noise, the Doyle Brothers. So Todd and Ryan is the lead singer, and he plays some guitar and some keyboards and things. It was a great singer. Talented writer. I've done a bunch of writing with him, and I've done some work on his solo stuff called Rhino as well. And then his brother Todd, who plays drums and percussion and all kinds of cool things. So this track, Ryan and I wrote the initial bits of it, just piano and us in a room with our phones recording just the thing. And then when we got together with Todd and the tune evolved into what it is now, Ryan switched to guitar, and Todd plays the cajon, the box drum, you know, those things that you sit on and you slap with your hands. So so that's kind of how this started. So when we first dug into it and we decided we wanted to record this tune, and there's a bunch of others, we were wondering, well, what's the best way to approach this? Because we weren't going after a sound that was as organic as guitar and the box drum. We wanted it to sound more like something you might hear on the radio, or could be used on a webcast called Nickel City Noise. Anyway, so we were looking for the right approach to the tune, and so what we did was we thought, well, we wrote the tune with basic instruments. Let's start there. Let's record it with basic instruments. And so the first thing that we recorded after the vocal, and we had decided the tempo, because everyone that has tuned in on my sessions before knows I'm a big proponent of get the vocal in there right away, and this was no different. It was the first thing we recorded was a guide vocal, which is no longer in the session, otherwise I'd play it for you. But so we recorded the guide vocal first, and then we went to the box drum, to the cajon. And this is what it sounded like. Let me get that working for you here. So this is just the cajon, the box drum, all by itself. Now, how I recorded this was similar to the way that I would record a drum kit. Okay, let's go back up to the top. So I had a mic in the kick drum. I had a snare mic sort of on the front where he hits it. I had an overhead mic, left and right, and then I had a room mic, and that sounds like this. This is just the cajon drum. But Brent, there's a tambourine. There's no such thing as a tambourine on a cajon. Well, that's because Todd sits on the drum, and in one hand he has a tambourine, and he smacks the cajon at the same time with the tambourine in his hand. So when he's playing, he's doing this the whole time, which is pretty cool. He sits on a drum stool and he angles the cajon, and it's a pretty cool way to watch someone play. It's different than most people that you see play the cajon. But anyway, so that's what we started with. And then it was, well, how do we make this sound? Because that's not exactly sort of a pop kind of commercial sound that we're after. How can we make this sound more like a drum kit? So we took the cajon part and we added some things to it. So here's the cajon on its own. And we added a kick drum sample. So I triggered the kick drum just like I would in a normal drum kit. Take the sample out. Here it is, just cajon. Kick sample in. So it makes the cajon sound a lot bigger and certainly a lot fatter, but it doesn't change the integrity of what we started with. So now there's also a snare sample that we added as well. So let's hear what that sounds like. So here's the cajon without the snare. And now I'll add the sample. Let's take it out again. Add it. So without the samples, the cajon sounds like this. A much more natural sound, and with the samples it sounds like this. Dare I say, more like a drum kit. Anyway, so then what did we do? Well, we thought we need a drum fill sound, some kind of drum fill. So I was sort of old enough to remember the 80s, and I still had some rototoms kicking around. I don't know if any of you remember what those are, but they were pretty fun in their day. They were on a sort of a stand, and there was usually 3 of them, and you could spin the top of them, and they sounded kind of cool in 80s, kind of Men at Work like. And anyway, so what we did was we added some drum fills on the rototoms, and they sound like this. Now, rototoms don't sound quite that crazy. There's lots of compression and room and all kinds of things in there as well, but those are the rototoms. Here's another one of the fills. Okay, so we added rototoms, and then we were like, well, the tambourine is pretty awesome, but wouldn't it be cool if there were some cymbals on top? And so we set up my cymbals in my studio. I did this when I still had my big chapel studio. So we set up the cymbals, and we recorded a cymbal track over top. And I, again, set up the mics exactly like I would for a drum kit, but Todd didn't play anything but the cymbals, and here's the cymbals over top of everything. Or not. There we go, cymbals. Okay, so you can hear the ride cymbal and the hi-hat. So pretty cool. Like, we've got all this drum stuff happening, and we kind of recorded it all separately, but it's all organic. So it's like we were using samples, but we were actually using the real playing of Todd. Now, one of the coolest parts of this tune, and for me anyway, and when you listen to it, you may have noticed, I know Charmaine, who tuned in, she for sure noticed, because we talk about this all the time. Every good groovy song has a massive hand clap in it, and this one is no exception. And the hand clap in this song is actually from us, from Ryan, Todd, and I standing. My chapel had a big, massive room, and the 3 of us stood in a room and we just clapped. And we all did different takes of standing different distances from the mic, and we found a couple that we really liked, and we combined them together to make this massive clap sound. We did the same thing with the snaps. So the snaps and the claps in this track, you may have thought I just had some really cool sample library. Didn't. We actually made them ourselves. So let me play those for you, because I think they're one of the neater parts of this. So let me turn on the snaps and the claps. Here are the snaps right off the top of the tune. So that's us. And that big reverby thing, that was just the sound of the chapel in my studio. That was just the sound of the room recorded and compressed. So that was all natural. No use of any digital anything on that one. And then the claps at the end of the tune sound like this. Now, pretty big difference if I take the claps out. Let's put the claps back in. So that's kind of wow for me. And that clap sound actually, for those of you that listen to any amount of my work, which I suspect most of you don't, but just in case a couple of you do, you will hear that clap sound, I liked it so much, I made it my own sample of it, and I've used it in a bunch of things, not only for Ryan and Todd, the Doyle brothers, but for a number of other projects I've done as well. So pretty cool to be able to make your own sample like that ends up going to other productions that you're doing. So then other than that, we were kind of looking at, well, maybe we can make it even bigger with some snare. So we added some snare drums and a bunch of other stuff, and we ended up with all this business. But again, it was all played live by Todd. Okay, so there's our drums. A bazillion layers, and for those of you that are keeping score, and thought I was crazy in the last session because we had 64 tracks or whatever. This one has 102, I think. I know, it's a little excessive, but there's a reason for that. Everything is on its own track, and it's easy to mix, and it's pretty fantastic. So, the drums. The only element in this entire mix, which was a synthesizer, meaning like a digital synthesizer, is the bass part. And let me play that for you right now. This is the bass. Now, the bass part was pretty cool because we used it was actually a Steinberg. There was an old instrument. Remember, this was done in 2014, a while ago. There was an old Steinberg instrument called Virtual Bassist, and you could actually play it from a keyboard. So I set it up in manual mode like that, and I actually played the part. So the part actually was played. But then what we did to give it that sound was we ran it through, I have an old Ampeg 1969 B15 Portaflex amp, which is the most amazing amp, and actually the new Ampeg stuff sounds just as good. So any of the Ampeg B15 Portaflex flip top head stuff, if any of you have a place where you can play a real bass or want to reamp a synthesizer bass, the Ampeg stuff is amazing. So anyway, what I did was I ran Virtual Bassist from my laptop into the Ampeg, my old one, and I put a mic on it and I recorded it back in. And for Steve and for anyone else that's keeping score on microphones, I always, for bass cabinet, used an Audix D4 mic. That was my favorite microphone for bass, always. So that's what I used in this case, and I reamped it back in. And then in a couple of places, and I'll show you this, we actually messed with an envelope filter as well, just to give the bass a bit of a talky quality to it. So you'll hear here, and you can see where the track changes. You'll see it goes into this alternate sort of sound, and it's the same bass, but it has an envelope filter on it as well. So just to let you hear that. And then back to the regular bass. So it just gives the bass a bit of a talky quality, and it's a pretty subtle thing, but in the mix, I think it makes a difference.
Place to be. I'm Helen Mary, 'cause I might all night. Ladies in the know, all James Divine, all the
And there we go. So I use that at various points throughout the mix. There's a few different places where, you know, that envelope filter comes in. So there's a couple of tracks there. So as you can see, I sort of split things out. Now here's where the track counts get really high. Let's go to the group here, the guitar group, and let's just solo the guitars. And let's have a listen to what the guitars are doing. Here's the guitar parts. And then they change up a little bit, and the chorus here. Okay, so lots of guitars, and we'll break those down in a sec, but we have a question here. Do I mic the amp from Terry? Do I mic the amp or use the direct out? If we're talking about the bass was a virtual instrument. So it was actually on my computer. And this is going to sound crazy, but I really loved the sound of Virtual Bassist back then. And I didn't have anything that I liked as much. For some reason, the Steinberg Virtual Bassist. There's a new Steinberg instrument as well, which I don't have yet, but I can't wait to check out because it looks ridiculous. And I'm sure it blows away what we were doing back then. But because Virtual Bassist was an old instrument, I had it on an old laptop. It wouldn't install on the system I was actually recording on. So what I did was I had my laptop on my lap and I had a MIDI keyboard and I booted up Cubase on the laptop, an old version, and I played along to the track and I recorded the MIDI information, and then I sent the MIDI information from that laptop from the sound card out into the Ampeg amp through a reamp box, and then I put my Audix D4 on the speaker for the Ampeg amp and recorded it back in through my API stuff that I had at the time. So when you're hearing the bass, you're only hearing the sound that the mic captured on the amp itself. And I usually had the amp kind of distorted a little bit. That's why the bass sounds a little bit fuzzy, because I used to turn the amp up really, really loud so that I could get some. Here's just the bass on its own. It's a little distorted. I like that sound. Here's a bit of a tip about bass that's pretty cool, is that you can have distortion on a bass, and when it's in the mix, it doesn't sound nearly as distorted. So if I play the bass part on its own, that sounds pretty distorted, right? Now, if I put it into the mix with the whole thing, it probably doesn't sound quite as distorted.
That there are other worlds is insane to me. The legend here is so.
But what it does do is it enables the bass to kind of stick out in the mix. So for years, people would come in and we would record DI bass, like a direct in bass, and it would be this beautiful, big, bassy sound. And then when I was mixing, I would always struggle with, I can't hear the bass. Like, where did it just disappeared as soon as all the other instruments were in? And what I learned about mixing bass is that the bass part of the bass is actually the part that's not as important for hearing the bass as the upper part of the bass, the upper mids, and specifically around 750, 800 hertz. I have a story about that, which I'll tell you in a sec. But 750, 800 hertz is kind of the area where you need to boost if you're struggling to hear your bass in a mix. So what I found is that I found this one pedal called an MXR micro amp, which is actually a guitar pedal. But what I found is that when I would put this in line between the bass, either a bass guitar or a fake bass, as I was using in this case, and I would turn it up, it would sort of boost to the amplifier that 750 hertz, 800 hertz. The boost was in exactly the right place, and it would give it a little bit of distortion, which when you solo the bass it would sound distorted, but in the mix it would just sit in the right place. So that was the other secret weapon I used, was always the MXR micro amp. It's a little white MXR pedal that I highly recommend anyone who records bass, fake or real, check out. It's even though it's a guitar pedal, it's the best bass pedal on the planet. So anyway, my story. So I think I mentioned last time I did a session at Abbey Road, and the bass player on the session was this amazing guy named Dave Marquis, who has played with a bunch of people, many, many famous people that I'm sure you've heard of, but he was one of the bass players that played the original Pink Panther theme. And he had this great old Music Man Stingray bass. Like, I think he had serial number 001, if I'm not mistaken. So, you know, it's like you're looking at a piece of history with this bass. So we're in the session, and I record his bass, and I do the thing I always do, which is, you know, turn up 750, 800 hertz. In the case of this session, it was 800 hertz. And he comes out from recording his part, and he walks into the control room, and he's like, oh my goodness, like the sound of my bass, it's never sounded better. What did you do? And I explained to him what I just explained to you, that in order to hear the bass, you have to push 800 hertz up a little bit, and that's what I did. And I showed him the difference. I turned it up and down in the control room, and Dave went over and grabbed a Sharpie, which, for those of you that have ever contemplated where you're going to use the Sharpie, he took the top off, and on his Music Man 001 bass, he wrote on the back 800 because he wanted to remember, and he wanted to make sure he could get that sound again. So anyway, it was a moment of me of absolute fear because he defaced this beautiful piece of history. But anyway, whatever, it's all good. It was his bass, so he can do whatever he wants with it. Anyway, Dave was a wonderful guy and a wonderful bass player, and that was a fun little moment that we shared with the bass. Anyway, back to the guitars. So, to the question, Steve's question from last time, how do I record guitars? Well, the way I do it these days is a little different than I did it back then, but at this point, I would always record 2 tracks for the guitar, as you can see, and each guitar part is 2 tracks here, and I would keep them separately. Some people like to sum them down to 1 track, but I like to be able to control the mix afterwards between the 2 mics. So in these days, I was really into ribbon mics, and so the first track in each case is a Bayer Dynamic M260, which was modded, and then this second track was something called an RM3BX, which is kind of like it's kind of like a Royer 121. For those of you that know, it's a figure 8 ribbon. Anyway, for those that aren't technical, none of that matters, other than just to say ribbon mics are awesome for guitars and many, many other things, but especially guitars. So if you are going to be recording any amount of guitar through an amp, please do yourself a favor, go buy a ribbon mic. Now, in the case of my ribbon mics, neither one of them was stock. There was this guy named Steve Sank in the US whose dad was one of the originators of RCA ribbon microphones, which, for those of you that know about that, know that these are some of the most famous ribbon microphones in history. And my understanding is when Steve's dad passed away, he left him all this ribbon cutting equipment. So what Steve did was he would take sort of reasonably priced and inexpensive ribbon microphones, and he would basically just use the expensive part, which is the casing and all the physical parts of it. He would open them up, he would trash the cheap ribbon stuff, and he would replace it with the equivalent of an RCA ribbon. So my Bayer Dynamic M260 has an RCA ribbon into it that Steve did, and the RM3BX or whatever, what that was a Chinese-made copy of a Royer 121, and he made me a matched pair of these, and these are to this day, my favorite ribbon microphones I've ever heard, and they're actually my go-to for acoustic piano as well. I still record at Yamaha. I've done some classical recordings and things, and these are the microphones that I always go to first. And I used to have some very expensive Earthworks microphones that I actually even prefer these over those as well. I sold my Earthworks just to use these cheap Chinese-made. I think they were like $200 a pair. Steve modded them, and I think for $700 I have this matched pair of ribbon microphones. So So that's what I did. I mentioned that these days I do it a little differently. What I do now is I use one ribbon and one dynamic mic, so like an SM57 and a ribbon. I find that those two kind of give me a little bit more of the stuff I'm looking for these days, but always experiment with two microphones when you're doing it. So here's what it sounds like, the two mics together on this. Now, just so you can hear the difference, this is just the M260. Let's go to the chorus, it's a little louder here. M260, here's the other mic. A little bit darker. And if we put them together, so you'll see in each case, I have the two microphones and all mixed together. This is what they do. And I obviously have them, for those of you listening in stereo, you'll hear them to the left and to the right. Okay, so up to this point, drums, bass, snaps, claps, bass, guitars. Here's what the mix sounds like. Okay, so we have arrived at the keyboard parts. Now, the keyboard parts, and again, I was in a very, very luxurious position of having a grand piano, an upright piano, a Hammond organ, a Rhodes, a Wurlitzer, a bunch of vintage synthesizers, and a bunch of digital synthesizers, as well as like harmoniums and all kinds of crazy. I had so many things, and so that was a wonderful luxury to have, and we made full use of them on this. I still have many of those instruments, but because I'm currently in a condo, most of the instruments I have around me say Yamaha on them. However, I still have my Fender Rhodes just over there, and my Mini Moog and my Wurlitzer are also over there as well. But while we're talking about Hammond, and I don't mean to be like a shameless Yamaha promotion person, but Yamaha just released something called a YC61, which is an organ type keyboard. We're not allowed to say that other company that made organs that's very famous for copyright reasons, but it's an organ type instrument with drawbars, and it is mind-blowing, I'm telling you. So you don't need any kind of organ from 1929 like mine was. You just need a YC61 nowadays. But in this case, I actually did use it. But one thing I wanted to point out was in the writing of this song, for those that paid attention to the lyric, this song was kind of about, we were looking for a New York socialite, hanging out with all the beautiful people, kind of lyric vibe. And so we were kind of channeling Frank Sinatra, Rat Pack, where everybody got dressed up, and you know, it was a different time. You know, sort of we were trying to channel the sort of a Frank Sinatra meets modern socialite kind of thing. And so when we were coming up with parts, we wanted to tip our hat to Frank Sinatra and things like that. So there's talk about Frankie in the lyric in the beginning, and when I play the tune at the end, you can hear that. But the other thing we wanted to do is when you think of Frank Sinatra, of course, you think of New York, New York, and so the ba 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 da 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 ba ba ba. So what we wanted to do is not rip that off, but we wanted to come up with a piano part that would sort of tip its hat to New York, New York, but would be something that would work in this song. So this was the piano part that we came up with. Ba 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 da 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 ba 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 da. You know, this. Right. So that was the piano part. Now, what makes up this piano part, because it's got a bunch of things happening? Well, this was the original part that we recorded in 1 octave. And I did that with a Shure SM7B, which is kind of like a glorified SM57. So not a fancy mic. It was just like pointed at the strings and captured the room as well. Here's what that sounds like again. And then I played it up the octave with the 7B, SM7B again. Made sure it was all sloppy and whatever, so it sounded cool. So here it is up the octave with the lower octave. And yes, honky tonk style is correct. That was done on my upright piano, which it was funny. I always had tuners in my studio to tune my pianos often, especially the grand piano. But my upright piano, it was like the best saloon piano ever. Saloon piano meaning it was kind of just the right amount out of tune. And for any of you that have listened to a lot of the indie music of the last, 15 years or whatever, like Broken Social Scene influenced stuff, you'll notice that the pianos are always just a teeny bit out of tune. And so my upright piano, which was 100 years old and sounded really cool, I actually would only tune it once a year because it was always held close enough that I could use it and it would have this kind of sound. But it was never perfectly in tune. And actually, sometimes I would tune it on my yearly tuning, and it would bum me out because it was too much in tune. So I tended to keep my grand piano really in tune, and my upright piano kind of sounded like this. So what else did we use? Well, we used a Hammond organ, and I was talking about how we sort of wanted to tip the hat to Frank with the New York piano thing. Well, with the organ sound, we thought it would be cute, and there's a background part that matches with it. But, since we were talking about good-looking socialite people all dressed up, we wanted to do a little that sort of sound. So we sort of tried to emulate that with the Hammond, which I think is this part, if I'm not mistaken. There you go. So that was by design, that we put that in there. And these are just subtle little arrangements, things that, probably mostly I just find amusing. But I think they're worth thinking about when you're putting an arrangement together, because I think they can really sort of raise the level of what you're doing. The other thing I had in here, there's a bunch of Hammond things. And I wanted to play for you the Wurlitzer part, which is pretty straight up. But again, I recorded this not direct out of the Wurlitzer. I recorded this through an amp. You can hear it with the Hammond. And my favorite amp for recording the Wurlitzer is this little, it's made by a company called Trinity Amps, called a Tramp, and it's like a Fender Champ. It's his version of it. It's such a fantastic amp. And I would record, if I was using Rhodes or Wurlitzer or any of the keyboards through an amp, I would record them the same way I did guitar, usually with, in this case, 2 ribbons, but these days, like an SM57 with a ribbon mic, or I have a whole bunch of sort of SM57 copies, or dynamic mics that sort of have their own flavor. If anyone wants to know what my favorites are, they can get to me offline. But Audix i5 is a modern one that's pretty cool. I've got this old mic called a D321 by AKG, which is maybe the best SM57 that was never an SM57. I got a whole bunch of them. I have an original Beta 57, which sounds different than the new Beta 57As. So super cool. All this stuff is super cool, and you can geek out forever. Use what you have. But I had a lot of things, and so I was able to really experiment and find the things that I liked. So, but anyway, let's have a listen to all this keyboard stuff together, because it's kind of cool to hear all of it going at the same time. And again, none of these parts are particularly complicated. I think that what makes a song really strong is when the vocal can shine and the instrumental parts can stay super simple and in the background. Let's go to the bridge where some other things happen. And again, it doesn't get any simpler than this. Yep. Pretty simple. Okay, so I like simple parts. So let's hear the mix up to this point with just all the instrumental stuff, and then we'll get into some vocal things. Okay, so here's the track just with the instruments. I'm going to turn off my mic. Okay, so I hope that now that there's a little bit of background for some of those parts, that you hear things a little bit differently. I know that I certainly do when I learn what someone was thinking about before. So the most important part of the mix and any song that has a vocal, in my opinion, is obviously the vocal. Now, this is pretty cool in that most of the stuff I do is probably a little bit more vocal intensive than this one. Ryan is such a good singer that I didn't really have to do too much layering and stuff, but I did do a couple of neat things which I'll show you here. So let's just turn on the vocal group here and let's check out what's happening in the vocal. Okay, here we go.
That there are other worlds is insane to me. The legend here is so much fun. Yeah. Uptown in old New York is the place to be. I'm Helen Mary, 'cause I'm mine all night. Ladies in the know, all day.
Okay, so you heard a couple of things there. Okay, so let's first talk about this. So we have a vocal track here which is tuned, and there will be a future Steinberg session once we can actually get the screen, so I can actually screen share with you. It's a long story why I can't, but we're getting there. But we'll do a session on all the different tuning ways of tuning, auto tune, Melodyne, and then Devin Lougheed, who I see is here this evening. Hello, Devin. He showed us a really cool way how he tunes vocals just using Cubase all on its own. So look for that in an upcoming episode. But anyway, these are tuned vocals, and I did my 4 effect thing, which for those of you that have been around for a while know what that's all about. There's like a modulation thing is my first effect, then there's like a delay effect, and then I have 2 different reverbs. But in this, what you'll see, I know you can't see the screen too well, but this little bit down here is like this extra kind of chopped up track. And what that is I actually have a track 2 up here is a delay track, a mono delay track, which is through the whole song. But then what I did was I wanted certain lines to have kind of a longer delay. And so what I did was I printed that on a separate track, and you can hear it come in. So
So much fun, yeah.
fun, yeah, fun, yeah. So it repeats
Uptown in
there.
old New
Now it's
York is the
gone.
place to be.
And then it comes back here.
I'm Helen Mary, 'cause I might all night.
And I wanted that really long delay there because I thought it sent us into the chorus a little bit better. So just a little mix trick for some things that you do. Once again, I have the verses separated from the choruses, and each one of these tracks has the 4 effects on it. So again, this is why the track count gets crazy. Now there's some other cool special little things happening here, which I will show you here. If we go into the chorus here, you'll hear.
Ladies in the know.
Oh, what happened there? It's coming back. It's coming back.
Ladies in the know. All dames divine.
And it's going to happen again.
Ladies in the know. All dames divine. Oh, they look fine. Ladies in the know. All dames divine. Oh, they look fine.
Okay, so the song is obviously called Ladies in the Know, and so I was looking for a way, because I knew Ryan's such a strong singer and his brother's great at harmonizing, but I knew we weren't going to do layer after layer after layer of things, which is pretty typical of most pop music these days. I was looking for a way that I could emphasize the title of the song and the main line of the chorus. So what it is it's like a Moog filter delay thing, and it sounds like this on its own. And I'll play it for you again. Here it comes again. And as you can hear, the filter is kind of sweeping. And then I put it on the last line here as well. Right, so, and then when we put that in the mix with everything else, I think it's pretty cool. And it's mixed loud enough that you can actually...
Oh, all dames divine. Oh, they look fine.
You can actually hear it as an effect. So that's in there, and that was kind of fun. Then in terms of backgrounds, Todd just sung a couple of lines. So let's have a listen to Todd's background parts here, along with Ryan. So here we go. Here's the chorus.
All night. Let's go. Ladies in the know. All dames divine. Oh, they look fine. Let's go. Ladies in the know. All dames divine. Oh, they look fine. Let's go. Ladies in the know. All dames divine. Oh, they look fine. Let's go. Ladies in the know. All dames divine. Oh, they look fine.
Okay, so Todd is singing Let's Go, and what else is doing the Let's Go?
All night. Let's go. Ladies in the know. All dames divine. Oh, they look fine. Let's go. Ladies in the know. All dames divine. Oh, they look fine. Let's go. Ladies in the know. All dames divine. Oh, they look fine. Let's go. Ladies in the know. All dames.
Okay, so that's kind of how we approached the background vocals. Now, there's one other background element, which I think is maybe the most important element, but again, we were trying to use the ideas that we had over and over again. So I told you about our snap and our clap parts, where we did these big group claps and snap sessions around the mic, and we were moving different distances from the mic to get different people close to the mic and back, and more room sound and all kinds of different variations on the theme. Well, guess what? We decided that that would be cool to do that with the vocals as well. And so we ended up with this like big gang vocal. And this is myself and Ryan and Todd recorded, the three of us, and we didn't do it individually. It was like the three of us around a mic in this big massive room, just kind of shouting, and we would try it high, we would try it low, and so we ended up with this big gang vocal, and this is what it sounded like, just on its own.
Let's go.
So it sounds like a group of people.
Let's go. Let's go.
Now, we didn't only use it for that part. We used it in the bridge of the song. It's look at him, look at her, look at you, and look at me too. So we did it here too. Oh, we don't have that one. Here we go.
Look at him, look at her, look at you, and look at me too. Look at him, look at her, look at you, and look at me too. Look at him, look at her.
You can hear the jazzy Frank Sinatra thing has shown up again.
Look at her, look at you.
Okay, so let's put these gang vocals in with Todd's backgrounds and with Ryan's vocals, and let's just hear an a cappella mix of this to get a sense of what's going on in the vocal here.
That there are other worlds is insane to me. The legend here is so much fun. Yeah. Uptown in old New York is the place to be. I'm Helen Mary, 'cause I'm mine all night. Let's go. Ladies in the know, all dames divine, oh they look fine. Let's go. Ladies in the know, all dames divine, oh they look fine. Let's go. Ladies in the know, all dames divine, oh they look fine. Let's go. Ladies in the know, all dames divine, oh they look fine.
So not tons of parts, but as you can hear with all those different little textures, the little delays that creep in and the gang vocals and all the different colors that happen, the vocal really changes itself up.
There'll be no vagabonds in the room tonight.
Let's scoot forward to the bridge because I think
Divine, oh, they look fine. Look at him, look at her, look at you.
Ryan comes in over top of the gang vocal.
Look at him, look at her, look at you, and look at me too. Look at him, look at her, look at you, and look at me too. Look at him, look at her, look at you, you know you look good too.
Okay.
Ladies in the
So the only other thing I would like to say is that one of the best things I ever learned from working with English writers, people from the UK, guys and girls from the UK, they have a kind of an approach that's different from the way most North American people I've worked with work. In that, what they do is they come up with sort of a basic building block of a tune. And then they come up with hooks to go over top. And they'll come up with 3 or 4 hooks. Then they choose the strongest hook as the chorus. The less strong hooks become the verse and the bridge. And then there's another hook that they usually bring in at the end. And that's kind of how they do it. It's like a 4-hook approach to doing it. And at the end of the tune, they basically throw all the hooks at you. So all these cool little memorable melodic things that you've heard throughout the tune, they just all come at you at once. So this was when I first sort of learned that this was an approach to songwriting, I thought, well, wow, what a cool approach to things like production and that as well. And so in this case, this is something that we used in this tune at the very end. The look at him, look at her, look at you, and look at me too bit that we have in the bridge, we bring it in at the end over top of the chorus, and it goes like this.
You know you look good too.
So we get the chorus.
Ladies in the know, all dames divine, oh they look fine. Ladies in the know, all dames divine, oh they look fine. Ladies in the know, all dames divine, oh they look fine.
So we got just a regular chorus, and now we get the layer.
All dames divine, oh they look fine. Look at him, look at ladies in the know, look at you. All dames divine, oh they look fine. Look at him, look at ladies in the know, look at you. All dames divine, oh they look fine. Look at him, look at ladies in the know, look at you. All dames divine, oh they look fine. Look at him, look at ladies in the know, all dames divine, oh they look fine.
So it's a pretty cool round that happens at the end vocally, and again, a great, not only writing technique, but a great production technique as well. So I think that's all the parts. Should we listen to the tune one more time? I think we should, and we'll listen all the way through, and then I'm happy to answer any more questions. I don't know if anyone has asked anything else, but while we're listening, I'll turn off my mic and I'll see what everyone has said. So here is Ladies in the Know in its entirety, and hopefully it sounds a teeny bit different than it did the first time. Here we go.
That there are other worlds is insane to me. The legend here is so much fun. Uptown in old New York is the place to be. I'm Helen Mary, 'cause I might all night. Ladies in the know, all James Divine, oh they look fine. Ladies in the know, all James Divine, oh they look fine. Ladies in the know, all James Divine, oh they look fine. Ladies in the know, all James Divine, oh they look fine. My bags are packing now and the mood is right. This one will fly me right to the moon. There'll be no vagabonds in the room tonight. This band of brothers gonna croon. Alright, yeah. Ladies in the know, all James Divine, oh they look fine. Ladies in the know, all James Divine, oh they look fine. Ladies in the know, all James Divine, oh they look fine. Ladies in the know, all James Divine, oh they look fine. Look at him, look at her, look at you, and look at me too. Look at him, look at her, look at you, and look at me too. Look at him, look at her, look at you, you look at me too. Look at him, look at her, look at you, you know you look good too. Ladies in the know, all James Divine, oh they look fine. Ladies in the know, all James Divine, oh they look fine. Ladies in the know, all James Divine, oh they look fine. Ladies in the know, all James Divine, oh they look fine. Look at you, look at ladies in the know, all James Divine, oh they look fine. Look at you, look at ladies in the know, all James Divine, oh they look fine. Look at you, look at ladies in the know, all James Divine, oh they look fine. Look at you, look at ladies in the know, all James Divine, oh they look fine.
All right. So hopefully you heard some things that you didn't hear the first go through on that. Just rolling through some of the comments here. If you have questions, please put them in now. It'll take a second for the feed to catch up. So by the time I get through what's here now, if you've asked your question, I will be able to get to it. But lots of talk about the claps. Oh yeah, those 80s like drum machine claps. I love them too. I use Charmaine is my colleague who's the keyboard product manager at Yamaha. We both love old soul music, and we talk about that stuff all the time for sure. Love those old clap samples, and I use them quite a bit. But it's nice to have one of my own too that I recorded with a project. Aya, hi Aya. It's nice to see you again. Aya is a regular in the Toronto group. Aya's asking when I tune the vocal, at what point? So here's how my vocal production happens. I record a whole bunch of takes. I'm not a huge fan of recording verse, chorus in separate bits. I'd rather do entire takes, although Siobhan, my daughter, has talked me into doing bits at a time, and some other folks that I've worked with as well have convinced me it's a good idea to do it that way. So I do it that way sometimes, but my preference is to do takes. And the reason I like to do a take from beginning to end is because I always find when a singer sings a song from beginning to end, there's an energy flow that happens, and I think that the energy when you start is always going to be different than it is at the end, and so I like to preserve that energy shift, unless it's like a straight up pop tune, in which case you want the chorus to be the same every time. But I really love that sort of flow from a quieter, sort of softer approach to, like, I've been singing now for 3 minutes and 20 seconds, and I'm sort of getting tired, and here's my big last chorus. I really love that. That's a cool thing for me. So I record a bunch of takes. How many takes depends on how the singer's doing, and if they sound amazing on the first take, we probably won't do too many. But my rule of thumb when I'm recording vocals is I always record to what seems to be the peak, like, oh my goodness, I can't imagine a better take than that. And then I do one more. And then if that one gets better, then I do one more. So I keep going up the hill until I get to the top, and then I go down one, and then I stop, because we're probably not going to get another one. That's good. So that's my approach. Then I comp the vocal. Comp is short for compile the vocal. So chop it all up and pick the best bits from each. People often ask me, like, do you take it line by line, or do you do it word by word? Totally depends on the vocal. I've done it syllable by syllable in extreme cases where I really needed to, but my preference would be to take a line at a time to kind of preserve the phrasing and the way that a line went. Sometimes I can use most of one take if it's a really amazing take. It just really depends on the song and the singer and how well they did on that thing. So I comp it all up, and then I combine all of my bits onto one track, because when you're editing, it kind of looks like a checkerboard. It's like there's bits all over the place. So I put those all on one track. I do nice little crossfades between each of the cuts so that it's smooth, and then I tune. That's before I mix. So that's the point at which I tune. Oh, Devin, distortion on everything is wonderful. I wish I could distort my voice right. Well, actually, I could. I could just turn up really loud anyway. Okay, Stingray, fuzz pedal. Yeah, fuzz pedals are great. I have a Rubbermaid full of all kinds of cool pedals, which, Devin, I haven't forgotten that I'm going to loan that to you. I promise I will. I just have to get to my storage room. And since I'm moving, I will get to my storage room. So I will bring you that Rubbermaid of pedals. And then Devin's Productions will have all these cool new sounds. So check out Devin Lougheed's Productions. He's just finished, or just is finishing, a thing for an artist called Sky Wallace. Sky plays an amazing Pacifica guitar. She's an awesome artist. And Devin and Gina play in her band, and you need to check this out. They also have a band called Altered by Mom. Devin is a Cubase guy, and he's done sessions. And actually, we've been talking about maybe doing a VST Connect one in an upcoming session as well. So we'll keep working on that. What else do we have? Yes, I did own all that stuff. I spent a small mortgage working on collecting all of those instruments. Anyway, what's Terry? That's a lot of work. I mean, chopping up the words and putting them together. Yeah, it's tons of work. But I've never met a vocal that couldn't benefit from doing it that way. It always makes things better, in my opinion. So it's always worth the work. All right. Is that all? Could we have reached the end of the questions for this evening? Perhaps we have. Anyway, I just wanted to say thank you again for coming out. I'm going to try to mix the sessions up. Some of them will be programmed. Some of them will be real instruments like this. I've got some old rock and roll sessions that when I go to my storage room, I'll pull them out. So we're going to get some guitar-based music as well. There will be all kinds of stuff. The next couple of sessions, I think I'm going to do one specifically. This is still up for grabs, so please send me an email and send me your suggestions on what you'd like to talk about. But I feel like the next couple, hopefully Devin and I can do the VST Connect one, which is a really cool Steinberg Steinberg technology, which allows you to record people remotely, which is obviously in times of pandemic like this, a huge asset to be able to do that. So VST Connect in an upcoming session, and also I thought maybe next time we could talk about, or the time after, we could kind of talk about vocal arrangements and how to approach a vocal arrangement from song to finished vocal arrangement, and how on one song I'm thinking of in particular, sort of the writing, you know, we wrote the song and then we went into the arrangement, and then how the vocal arrangement evolved throughout the production process as well. So I think that might be an interesting one. Anyway, thank you so much for coming out again. Appreciate you all being here. Please send me an email. Please go to Yamaha Canada Solutions on Facebook and sign up, and you'll hear about all these things in the future, and can't wait to see you all again. I think I will play you out. Here it is one more time, Ladies in the Know by the Doyle Brothers. Enjoy everything opening up, ladies and gentlemen.
That there are other worlds is insane to me. The legend here is so much fun. Uptown in old New York is the place to be. I'm Helen Mary, 'cause I'm mine all night. Ladies in the know, all James Divine, oh they look fine. Ladies in the know, all James Divine, oh they look fine. Ladies in the know, all James Divine, oh they look fine. Ladies in the know, all James Divine, oh they look fine. My bags are packing now and the mood is right. This one will fly me right to the moon. There'll be no vagabonds in the room tonight. This band of brothers gonna croon. Alright, yeah. Ladies in the know, all James Divine, oh they look fine. Ladies in the know, all James Divine, oh they look fine. Ladies in the know, all James Divine, oh they look fine. Ladies in the know, all James Divine, oh they look fine. Look at him, look at her, look at you, and look at me too. Look at him, look at her, look at you, and look at me too. Look at him, look at her, look at you, yeah, look at me too. Look at him, look at her, look at you, you know you look good too. Ladies in the know.